Foreign exchange is the act of converting currency. Let's just say converting Canadian dollars into US dollars or US dollars back into Canadian. A foreign exchange is essentially a culmination of what amount you want to convert, what rate you're ultimately getting, and what that comes out to in the other currency that you require. The reason why it's so important, though, is because depending on how much of your business is exposed to the currency markets, you need to be able to properly forecast what your cash flow is going to be from one month to the next. And now if the US dollar is 10% higher one month compared to the next month against whichever currency you're operating in or paying in, that ultimately impacts your cash flow.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Pivot to Profit, where we talk all things business and the wonderful world of money and accounting, and hear entrepreneurs' success stories and the hard lessons learned. Our guest today is Marc Racette. What's up, buddy?
Feeling good.
I'm so glad that we could get it coordinated, and you and I actually know each other in live and in person. You're up in good old Toronto, but we met up in New York a couple weeks ago, and so that was fun to hang out and see you live and in person. So let me officially introduce you, and then we'll dive into questions. So Marc is the founder of Pulse FX, a financial solutions firm helping businesses optimize cross-border payments, manage FX risk, and unlock growth through smarter trade finance strategies. With a focus on empowering business owners, Marc provides a practical, results-driven approach to improving cash flow, protecting margins, and scaling profitably in today's global economy. Through Pulse FX, he partners with entrepreneurs and advisors to deliver tailored solutions that simplify complexity and drive sustainable business growth. Whew! All right, so that's a whole lot. Before we dive in, we're going to go back. What did little Marc want to be when he grew up? What was like 5-year-old Marc's dream?
Good question. I honestly wanted to find a career that allowed me to travel, allowed me to explore. Growing up, my family was very big on, vacationing between, North America, maybe the Caribbean at most. Getting up to the age of 20, I have never even had a chance to go to Europe, Asia, even South America, really. So, I mean, for most of my childhood, it was just a dream to find something that allowed me to work internationally and travel.
Okay, I got you. So, what was little Marc taught about money? Was money good? Was money bad? Should you have it? Should you not? What was the ethos around money for you?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I came from a family that didn't talk a lot about money. So it really wasn't a lot of education around it other than try not to spend it if you can't. If you do, make sure you're spending it in a way that makes sense. And no one really taught me what quote unquote made sense. So I didn't really have much of an upbringing that talked about strategies of saving money and what to use it for, topics such as what's debt, what's, a worthwhile long-term investment versus short-term. In Canada, we have what's the difference in RRSP, TFSA, I think US 401k. Like none of that was really taught to me until I would say I was after the age of 20, 25 even. Not a lot of money focused or knowledge upbringing in terms of.
Okay, so you are full-fledged in the money business these days. So where did you learn about money? Where did you get an education that like, hey, money matters and what happens when it crosses borders matters? Like, where did you learn all that?
Yeah, so a lot of that came during university when I moved out of the house. I needed to now pay for tuition. I needed to figure out rent. I needed to figure out grocery expenses. So a lot of that came just with me, leaving the family home and now being in a world where money is important. You need to understand what's coming in, what's going out. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to pay rent one month. You're not going to be able to have dinner one night. So that was really my crash course. Thankfully, I moved out with a good friend of mine who at the time was also studying accounting and was really into it. And then we actually had a little like spreadsheet going on all the expenses that we were putting through from internet to, we do like dinner events with a few friends every once in a while. He was ahead of his time, I would say, more advanced than I was at understanding all this. And that's kind of where I started learning a lot about finances and how to manage them at that point.
The accounting roommate in college coming in clutch, making Marc sit down and 19-year-old, here's your beer budget, here's your rent budget. I love it. It's fantastic. All right, so let's dive into foreign exchange, FX. You launched Pulse FX because you saw a need in the industry and you identified that there's a gap in the financial services industry. So, in the simplest terms possible, explain foreign exchange and why people should care.
For sure. So foreign exchange is the act everyone of converting currency. Let's just say converting Canadian dollars into US dollars or US dollars back into Canadian. A foreign exchange is essentially a culmination of what amount you want to convert, what rate you're ultimately getting, and what that comes out to in the other currency that you require. I would say this is a very niche subject for a lot of business owners. It's one of those things that, predominantly businesses will use a bank for, or it's done by a payment processor that you might be using, like a Stripe or a PayPal, or if you're an e-commerce shop, it might be done by Amazon, it might be done by Shopify. It's one of those things that it's very much in the terms and conditions, kind of what rates you're getting, and it's kind of taken for granted. Not a lot of negotiation tends to happen with either banks or even providers. I would say the reason why it's so important though is because depending on how much of your business is exposed to the currency markets, you need to be able to properly forecast what your cash flow is going to be from one month to the next. And now if the US dollar is 10% higher one month compared to the next month, with which against whichever currency you're operating in or paying in, that ultimately impacts your cash flow, how much you're going to have, if it's going to eat into your margins, if it's going to all of a sudden now you have a lot more money left over because the US dollar is stronger and your payables are now technically cheaper. So it's worth understanding this as much as almost cash flow if you are once more in a business that it has that significant level of exposure. Otherwise, yeah, it's just very hard to just track where you're going from one month to the next. And that might mean that you just leave a lot of extra money in balance. You never know if you're going to need to call upon it. So we kind of educate and bring light to that particular subject for any business that is operating with multiple currencies and that has foreign exchange exposure.
Because if your business is based in the US, but then you have to pay someone in another country, in Canada, Europe, whatever, the $100 USD doesn't equal $100 in USD in another currency. And so understanding that exchange rate and what you're getting, and it might one month go further than it does the next month. So if you've got $1,000 bill that you need to pay, one month it could be 980, the next month it could be 1,020, and you just all based on that exchange rates. And you're saying that a lot of business owners just don't even think about it. Because I have clients that are in the US based businesses, but do a lot of business up in Canada. And, they're just letting their banks handle it and just sucking it up. As a bookkeepers and accountants, we've got a wonderful line item where it's just currency exchange loss or gain, where it's like, okay, this month we made an extra $500. Next month it cost us $400 to do the exchange back and forth. So you launched Pulse FX to bridge that gap. What does that mean? How are you doing that? And how does it directly help entrepreneurs?
Yeah, for sure. So in a few ways, we're trying to bridge that gap. First is through just education for clients as to what their specific exposure might be to currency. If they're exposed to a certain extent, what products exist to kind of protect them from that exposure. And then understanding, just with a business they're carrying out now, where FX might be occurring. Canadian clients, for example, if they're using a Canadian dollar credit card to make international purchases that are in US dollars, it's something that you naturally think, oh, I'll just put this on my credit card. You don't realize there's obviously an exchange happening there that's done on the back end. Now, same with, if you're doing more of a traditional payment for a vendor, I mean, that's something that you'll go to the bank, they'll say, okay, you want to send 10,000 euros, this is how much it's going to cost in US. And there's an FX happening there. So that's a little more prevalent or a little easier to figure out. But when it comes to things like Stripe, many people don't realize that once more, there's not only the exchange rate, like the market rate that's getting charged, there's a spread on top of that. And so it's a large portion of what we do is first educating a lot of our clients on where FX might be happening in their business, and then solutions to mitigate costs or to better forecast what the exchange costs will be if they do have significant exposure. So we do an assessment at first just to see once more the extent. If you're a $5 million a year business and if you have, let's just say, $2.5 million of foreign exchange, that's 50% of your business is now exposed to the market. So now we should be looking at strategies to better project cash flow. So that could be utilizing products such as a forward contract, which is essentially locking in a rate of exchange for a prolonged period of time. It could be a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you name it. That gives you a bottom line of sorts that you can use to forecast. Let's just say you lock in one for a month period. Any contract that you expect to sign and then close within that month, you know what the rate of exchange is going to be. So that helps you better.
You're not surprised by it costing you more or less, but locking it in. I love it. So a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand the hidden FX costs. Can you give us an example of a client that you worked with recently where you went and did your analysis and they didn't understand the exposure they had and how you solved it for them? So it's a practical example, because this is something that most business owners don't pay attention to.
Yeah, no, for sure. I had a really stark example that happened about 6 months ago. I have a client in Canada, was getting two payments from a venture capital firm in the US. First payment was going to be for $1 million. The next payment was going to be for 5 million. Now, that first $1 million, they basically received that in US dollars directly to their Canadian dollar account. They didn't bother to open up a US dollar account with their bank. So when that happens, if you divert funds that are not the currency in which your account is in directly into that account, your bank will auto charge an exchange rate. So we went back and found out they charged 3.5% on the conversion of $1 million US into Canadian. So we're talking roughly $35,000 just to receive a wire.
No.
Yeah. So that's something that happens a lot, whether it's on that scale of $1 million or even if it's a much smaller amount. It's one of those things that you can't get taken granted for, but it's really night and day how much the bank will charge on these types of conversions compared to what the market rate would be, for example. That's probably the most glaring example. So the solution for that is, well, one of two things. The client was at this point actively now looking to, I should go to my bank and open a US dollar account. But once more, that could take a little bit of time. So a product that we provided them, and this is something that's really popular for businesses receiving in currencies in which they don't have an account for, is called a virtual IBAN account. So this is like a virtual collection account that could be created in the name of a business that helps them receive funds in different currencies. So in this case, I helped them create a US dollar account. It's a Canadian business. I helped them create a US dollar account with Citibank in the US. And they were able to get paid into that account by the BC firm by ACH transfer, which is also an amazing tool for Canadian businesses. But they got paid into that account, and then we were able to then help them do the conversion back into Canadian, saving them once more close to $30,000 plus compared to what the bank would have charged.
Easy. At what level does someone need to realize that they have an exposure that's damaging? They say million plus is obvious, but there's a lot of smaller businesses that are paying contractors in other countries or collecting some of their clients pay them in Canadian. Like, at what level do they need to be concerned that, hey, this might be costing me?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I always recommend anyone that's doing, a couple thousand or more on, let's just say, a monthly basis, these costs could add up. Let's just say you're doing even like 100,000 a year. So, we'll break that down, less than 10,000 a month. You could be saving close to, $3,500 compared to just using a bank. And now scale that up. Now you're doing $1 million. Once more, you could be saving $35,000 a year. You're doing more than that. There's a lot of potential opportunity as the volume gets higher. But I always say if you're doing a couple thousand or more, it's worth just looking into, because you can dramatically cut costs on anything like in and around that realm, because I find the bank will even typically have tiered rates. If you're doing less than 10,000, maybe they're charging 5%. If you're doing over 10,000, maybe they're charging now 3.5%. So it can be eye-opening just to look into, and I highly recommend that.
And it's all just hidden and we just accept it. It's one of these, it's like merchant fees. Everyone's like, oh, well, I accept credit cards, so I just have to suck it up. No, you don't. And it's like with the foreign exchange, just because you're dealing with other currencies doesn't mean you have to suck it up. Doesn't mean that you have to lose that money. You can go after it. So you gave the example of the virtual having a bank account that collects money in that currency. What are some other tricks or tools that you have at your disposal to help entrepreneurs, business owners manage these costs?
Yeah, for sure. Going back to that actual same client example. So the first batch of funds, they got charged by the bank, and most of those Canadian dollar funds after the conversion were just parked in their account. They weren't fully utilizing them right away. So for the second batch of funds, I said, at this point, if you don't specifically need the Canadian funds for cash flow, it looks like, forecasts predicting the US dollar to stay strong, if not go up a little bit. Maybe keep it there for a bit. But what you can do at this point is maybe even look at a forward contract. So basically, that allowed them to know that if they wanted to draw on those funds over the next 6 months, they know exactly how much they'd be getting in Canadian. So that allowed them to better budget their projects, their expenditures, any other initiative that they needed capital for. So I always recommend that if you have either a big chunk of funds that you're sitting on, or if you have a big payment coming up that you might not necessarily need to pay it within 30, 60, 90 days, for example, or even later, looking into a forward contract, because if you can lock in today's rate and have that certainty, whether it's 90 days from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, that just allows you to get back to focusing on growing your business and not trying to worry about playing the money markets or hoping that the rate goes up or finding that it doesn't go down, for example. The trick is, eliminate that variable if you can and get back to finding ways to grow your own business.
Because if you've got $1 million US and you need it transferred over to Canadian, like if you can lock in that rate, it can save you tens of thousands of dollars if you know what to do. And okay, we're going to lock in this rate, and in 2 months, I'll make a withdrawal, and I know exactly how much money I'm going to get. Because the variance can be significant, especially with the fees that you don't understand.
Exactly.
So what about credit cards? If someone has a business based in the US, but do business outside of the country, say Canada, Mexico, do you use your US credit card when you're in those countries? What is the suggestion there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it depends on what types of transactions you're doing, and if you're traveling and just need something to pay for the occasional, coffee bill, for example, versus if you're paying vendors. So if you have vendors that you're currently paying on a credit card, there is a chance once more that they might potentially be marking up invoices a little bit because of the merchant fees on their end. So the trick around that is just seeing if you can even pay them directly through like a wire transfer. If they're in the US, through an ACH transfer, if they're in Europe through a SEPA, there's a lot of these payment methods around the world that are free for you and free for the beneficiary to receive. So I highly recommend looking into that. You'll find sometimes that your invoices might be a little bit cheaper because there isn't those merchant fees. Especially if you are converting currency, you'll find that a lot of the time there's an opportunity to get a much better rate of exchange. Your typical credit card is going to be the same thing, like 2.5%, 3.5%. So going even through your bank might be cheaper. Going through a broker, probably the best. But there's a lot of opportunity to save money. So if you're doing the occasional invoice that's like thousands of dollars or more, I would highly recommend talking to your supplier, asking them for wire information. And another big trick here, and this is something that a lot of people don't know looking for as well, is let's just say you're a US business paying a beneficiary in Mexico. Now, many of the vendors in Mexico, manufacturers, for example, will take US dollars, of course. But then you have to remember, then the FX risk is on their end to convert USD back to Mexican peso. Right. So you'll sometimes see them basically offered to bill you in US or Mexican peso. And in the bill for US, there'll also potentially be a markup there because now the risk is on them. So if you have the option sometimes to pay in a local domestic currency, I always recommend looking into that because more often than not, it's significantly cheaper than paying in USD if you do have the option to get billed.
That's a great tip, because if you pay in their local currency and you manage the FX rate, ultimately you will pay less USD.
Correct. Yeah. And it's very common to see a close to 5% markup whenever you have the two options. So like immediately from the get-go, if you can eliminate that 5%, even if now you're paying on your credit card, which is 3.5%, even then it's cheaper, right?
You're still saving 1.5 points on a $10,000 bill. That matters.
Yep.
That's crazy. So what about online sales? How can this affect people like in e-commerce space? They've got a Shopify store, Amazon. How does all this come into play there?
For sure. So for any company using a payment gateway or a online shop like Amazon, Shopify, Faire, the list goes on. These storefronts or payment gateways will also allow you to do the conversion through them, but it's not their core business. So they're not really competing on the FX rate side of things in any significant way. So more often than not, they'll be charging a pretty astonishing amount, once more close to that 3.5 to 4.5% range. So, easy way around that once more is through the use of these virtual IBAN accounts. So let's just say, you're a US business, you have a storefront on Amazon, and you're selling your product into the European market. Now, if you're selling your product into the European market, your clients are going to be paying in euros. So you're going to be collecting euros into that account. Now, you can do the conversion back once more to US and have it automatically just converted at month's end, but you're going to get charged a significant amount. So the trick there, it's not necessarily easy to just go to a bank and open a Euro account. There's going to be a lot of paperwork, and if anything, most financial institutions won't even offer that. So the way around that is create a virtual IBAN account. So this is an account that we can create for a business once more. It would be opened up in this case with Barclays. It would be located in Europe. So your clients or your payment gateway can easily deposit funds into that account, and then that allows you the flexibility to now convert them when you require them at a much better rate of exchange.
Instead of being done automatically by the bank. Because what I'm hearing is if the bank does it, it's going to cost you more just automatically.
Correct. And through these payment gateways, they'll be the ones that actually do the FX, because as soon as you try to connect an account, it'll ask you what's the currency of your account. And they say, so if you say US dollars, then they'll do the conversion, but it's going to be cost you the exact same as what a bank would charge.
And business owners probably aren't factoring that in, because if you have a US bank account, Stripe account, and someone pays in, euros, Stripe is automatically going to convert it to USD, and they're going to win on it.
Yep. Exactly.
So even though as a $2,000 transaction, you're going to come out 5% less because Stripe's going to take it.
Correct. And now, you have to think about this not even on a per transaction basis. Even if you're selling your product for a couple $100, for example, if you're selling thousands and thousands at a time, right? If you look at your overall exposure over a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, yeah, it can be quite eye-opening. Yeah, it'll add up.
So you come in, do you advertise? Do you get referrals? How do people find out about Pulse FX and that this is like maybe a huge cost line item for you that you're not even paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, we try to do a lot of educational content on our end, just because once more foreign exchange is a niche subject to talk about in terms of businesses requirements. But we do a lot of education pieces. We do work with, I would say, a lot of partners. On the e-commerce side, we work with a lot of people that help businesses set up storefronts, manage all that. On the financial side, we work with, fractional CFOs, for example, accounting firms, bookkeepers, you name it, anyone that might have insight into, where costs might be occurring. And we also are part of quite a few organizations where we're naturally, getting asked to do speeches, webinars, seminars, you name it.
So it really just starts with education and helping entrepreneurs understand that, hey, this could be a huge potential, I call it leaky bucket, right? All businesses have leaky buckets, but if 3.5 to 5% is leaking out just because of this FX rate that you're not even conscious of, that could be a huge drain on your cash, especially if it can go straight to your bottom line and profitability. So as entrepreneurs are identifying like, hey, I want to go global, I want to be doing transactions, paying vendors outside of whatever my local currency is, what are some first steps that they should take to prepare for that and do this well and not be like, oh, there goes 5%, thanks?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with doing a bit of a deep dive into what your overall exposure is, understanding what markets you're selling into, understanding if, how you're collecting funds. Once more, a lot of people might think that, foreign exchange is only when they go into the bank and they send a wire between one currency to another. It's really understanding that there's credit cards out there that have certain tier levels for FX exposure. Some say they have none, but technically there's just another side note here on the credit card thing. I always love to mention this as well. Even though your credit card might say they don't have a foreign exchange fee, that's what your bank charges on top of that. There's always going to be like a MasterCard or a Visa or like an Interact FX fee. So the overarching technology that that card uses. And then there's the bank fee on top of that. And that's why you see these big fees. But so it's just understanding, where exposure might happen, understanding how much of your business is exposed to the market. So, I mean, if only 10% of your business is exposed, then it makes sense to just look at this mostly from like maybe a savings perspective. If 90% of your business is exposed, now it's, significant cash flow exposure. You need to really understand how the markets could impact your operational cash flow needs from a month-to-month basis. So just understanding, level of exposure, understanding areas where you're exposed, understanding not just money coming in, but money going out, looking at all of your vendors, seeing where they are in the world. If you're realizing that most of your vendors, let's just say, are in Mexico, and you're having to send US dollars to them, maybe start having those conversations about, hey, just out of curiosity, if I had the ability to pay in Mexican peso, what would be the difference here? I would say start getting those conversations up and running. And then at that point in time, I think it's worth then looking into alternative options compared to just, say, using a bank or whatever payment platform you're currently using, like PayPal, for example, to do these transactions. Because you'll find there's a lot more services out there, a lot more solutions. Some are more digital in nature, some have full service, white glove in nature, and some are a mix of both in between in that sense.
No, I hear that. That's perfect. Because ultimately, what you're saying is a common mistake is the bank or payment processors focusing on their best interest when it comes to FX. Like they're not worried about the entrepreneur getting the full $200 that they put in USD equivalent. The bank and payment processors win in this if you don't pay attention and know how to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the nature of FX, right? I mean, if you're running a business and you have the ability to start selling your product into a brand new market, lots of opportunity to make money, you're usually like, yes, let's go for it. So FX is something a lot of businesses truly stumble into rather than something they prepare for ahead of time. It's more like an opportunity exists, let's go for it. Found a new vendor that could be significantly cheaper, let's go for it. And then you're kind of left after the fact, kind of looking at, oh, okay, well, there's other costs and other things we need to look at now. But yeah, FX I find, is one of those things that most people just kind of stumble into. And, there's definitely a lot out there in terms of solutions and strategies that are worth looking into after the fact as well.
And until you get a $10,000 Canadian wire into your bank account and then get a, $550 fee hit your bank account and you're like, what just happened? No, thank you. Please don't do that again. You don't even realize it. So what is on the horizon for Pulse FX? What's next for you guys? What's coming down the line?
Yeah, so for us, a few things. First and foremost, we're expanding into new markets. So we predominantly started as a Canadian-based firm. About 6 months ago, we also moved into the US market. And as of the end of the year, we're also moving into the European market. So a lot of expansion into new regions for us. And these markets are where we can work with clients. I mean, we can really, our infrastructure is technically global, but we're just looking at where most of our clients might have subsidiary companies and trying to be more supportive in that sense.
I love it. So bigger footprint.
Bigger footprint, yeah. And of course, that comes with, now we're in the process of hiring a few more people, which is also a fun new endeavor. We've been running lean for a little while, and now we're close to actually doubling the team, probably within the next 3 months. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Congrats on the growth. That's amazing. Marc, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so if they want, they can connect with me via email. So my email is marc.racette@pulse, PULSE, Alternatively, our website is pulsefx.com. You can find us on LinkedIn as well under PulseFX. Whatever works best. We're actively checking all our socials. We also actually just recently started an Instagram account. So feel free to follow us on Instagram as well. I believe that's under PulseFX as well.
Expanding into the US, you got to start playing on Insta.
Yes.
I love it. Well, this has been amazing. Look, business owners, your numbers matter. And these little 3.5%, 5% add up. And so if when you look at your bank and you want to know where your money is, we would love to help you at Pivot Business Group. Just go to pamjordan.com, schedule a call with my team. We would love to help you understand what are all the places that your money is leaking. And if it's with FX, we've got Mark here with Pulse FX that can help you out. And make sure you like, subscribe. And remember, it's not what you make that matters, it's what you keep. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.